I became really intrigued with the idea of the cycle of violence and how like certain events would trigger acts of violence that then would beget more acts of violence. It's almost never satisfying. It never brings the person you love back. And despite you thinking it's going to bring some closure, it doesn't. We just need more empathy.
The Last of Us 2 is a great game, but it's not the story that its writers think it is. It is incredible on a technical level. It has some of the best level design I've ever seen in a shooter, and it lets you spend time with some of the most well-written characters in any game ever made. But when it comes to tackling what its writers say are the main themes of the story, it falls short. What does Naughty Dog think The Last of Us 2 is about? If you look at the promotion for the game, all of it, every trailer, every press release, every interview, it's all clearly priming the audience for a story about revenge. The first line we heard from Ellie in the reveal trailer was,
"I'm gonna find, and I'm gonna kill every last one of them."
Neil Druckmann, at various points, described it as a game about the pursuit of justice to the ends of the earth and the cycle of violence. But The Last of Us Part 2 also wants to be a game about empathy. Druckmann said the goal was to make the player feel dirty and realize I'm actually the villain of the story. He said the game was about tribalism and how we dehumanize others to justify committing terrible acts. In one interview, he told the Washington Post that the spark of the story came from watching a video of the Ramallah lynching of 2000, when a group of Palestinians broke into a police station and killed 2 Israeli soldiers. Druckmann, who grew up in the West Bank of Israel, said that in that moment, he wanted to kill every last one of those people. But that anger wasn't what would become The Last of Us Part 2. The game stems from his later feelings of regret and shame over that initial impulse for violence and vengeance. The Palestinians who broke into the police station were only there as part of a funeral march for a child who the IDF had killed just 2 days before. Neil Druckmann wanted the game to explore what he saw as a cycle of violence and dehumanization. We'll come back to that. In no uncertain terms, Naughty Dog told the public that they should come into this game expecting a story about revenge and empathy. What we got was a game that was incredible in almost every way, except for as a story about revenge and empathy. The Last of Us 2 is many things. Subtle is not one of them. Now, I don't see that as a bad thing. Like I said in my video about The Last of Us Part 1, video games are uniquely suited for this heightened dramatic form of storytelling. So when they said that The Last of Us 2 was a game about violence, they meant it.
More than anything, combat in The Last of Us 2 is about physicality. You are forced to be very aware of your enemies as thick, fleshy things. Shooting someone doesn't just slap a blood texture on a model, it hurts them. Shotguns blow chunks out of torsos. Trap mines blast off legs. One of my favorite details in the whole game is this intense facial animation that plays during Ellie's stealth kill. The animators put so much effort into really selling how hard it is for Ellie to saw through someone's throat.
the sheer brutality has a different effect here than in a game like Doom. In Doom, you are ripping the demons apart because you are a badass. In The Last of Us 2, you are ripping people apart because you are a broken person that doesn't know any other way around her problems. All this brutality, all this violence is in the service of vengeance. Remember, the core of the game came from an experience of intense hatred. So to make you feel that hatred, the game pulls the nastiest sucker punch it possibly could. It takes Joel, and with him, all the time you invested in him. And it doesn't just kill him, it mutilates him in the nastiest, most graphic and grotesque way. And then it lets you loose to go track down the people who did it. To enact your revenge on them for taking away your apocalypse dad. It fills you with all this hatred and rage and sets you loose on the warpath of revenge. And here's where they trick you.
That tension is never released. You want to have a full-on Call of Duty QTE torture sequence with every last one of those scumbags. But half of them are dead before you get there. And so Ellie ends up spending her time just mutilating dozens and dozens of wolves, painting all of them with Joel's blood, when almost none of them have any idea who you even are. When you're playing as Abby, Ellie is barely a blip on anyone's radar. You enact your vengeance not on the people who wronged you, but everyone in their vicinity. Is this the justice you were looking for?
If The Last of Us 2 was a normal game, all this would culminate in one huge boss battle against Abby. One last epic finale to fight for Joel's honor. Instead, Abby beats Ellie's face in, because she's a soldier and Ellie's not.
But Ellie, and maybe the player, still has a deep, burning desire for that fight. She needs that narrative moment in her story. So she abandons everything again and tracks Abby down. But once again, the big epic fight is taken from her. When I got to the end, I walked around this field 3 times before I realized that this was Abby. The whole game, you knew Abby as the girl with big arms and a braid. All of that has been stripped away now. She's malnourished from weeks of starvation. Her hair has been chopped off. She is, in no meaningful way, the same person who came to Jackson. But Ellie still tries to fight her. You do finally get your one-on-one brawl, playing as Ellie this time. Your last chance to carry out what passes as your best approximation of vengeance. But it's not a dramatic boss fight. It's pathetic. It's 2 exhausted women in a fight that neither of them actually want. And even with some pretty intense blood loss, Ellie still has enough of an advantage to be able to pin Abby and begin to drown her.
And here's where the revenge theme runs into its biggest problem. This game is constantly pulling its punches.
In the entire game, you only get to kill one of Joel's killers in normal gameplay. And even then, it's heavily scripted. The other 6 are all in cutscenes, QTEs, or dead before you could get there. In the moments the game could make you, the player, participate in the acts of revenge that are core to the story's themes, it decides it wants to be a movie, actually, and it just makes you watch. It's a baffling decision, especially when the game has put so much effort into making normal combat so gruesome. Compared to the brutality of blowing off limbs or using someone as a human shield, cutscene violence just feels tame. And that includes the end of the game. You, as a player, are supposed to feel like Ellie has become the villain of the story. In this moment, she is a cruel sociopath, drowning a starving woman who spared your life twice just to fulfill your own sick idea of justice. But in this moment, right when the game could actually go all the way with its narrative and with its themes, it says no and turns back.
When the game came out, a lot of people were disappointed in the scene. Some people were disappointed they didn't get to kill Abby. Some people have worms in their brain. Other people felt like it didn't make sense for Ellie to throw everything away on her revenge mission, only to suddenly pull back at the last second. The Last of Us Part 1 similarly ended in an act of cruel and unnecessary violence. But people didn't have problems with that, even if they disagreed with Joel, because up to that point, the game was focused on the good and the bad in him. The game was confident that at this point you understood who Joel was. It's confident enough that it lets you press R2 and pull the trigger on the single worst act Joel has ever done. The Last of Us Part 2 is not about the goodness in Ellie. It's about her spiral into becoming the person Joel was before he met her. It's mean. It is an angry and bitter game. It is absolutely rotten. This game does not want you to feel good. No good deed ever goes unpunished. And if you truly want to make a game about revenge, this is where you put the final nail in the coffin. Have the hero who became the villain kill the villain who became the hero. Let me take all the themes you spent 30 hours instilling into me, and don't put it in a cutscene. Let me use the mechanics of the game that you taught me to commit this last terrible act. And then let me regret it. Let me sit there in a dead, gray ocean. Let me feel the hollowness of this victory.
But that's not where the game ends. The game ends by smashing you in the face with a brick and saying, look, revenge is bad. Ellie has lost things. Her farmhouse is empty now. This game is never subtle. The writers explicitly said that the moment Ellie leaves the house is supposed to be the moment that no player agrees with her anymore, even a little bit. It hammers in hard that revenge is pointless and doesn't get closure for anyone. And that's the thing. They spend so much time making sure you know what they think about revenge and the cycle of violence that they don't have any time left to explore the more interesting questions raised along the way.
They do try to say something a little more substantial. They try to make a grand statement about how the idea of revenge impacts society, with the scars and the wolves playing out a large-scale allegory of the violence cycle in the background. But even that falls flat, because as Emanuel Mayberg pointed out in his article for Vice, the idea of a cycle of violence doesn't work when one side can easily choose to end the violence. To bring it back to the incident that inspired the game, the Israeli soldiers were killed because the Israeli military had been killing dozens of Palestinian children. Discussing a cycle of violence as being inevitable and just part of human nature usually assumes that both parties are on equal footing, when this is rarely the case. There is almost always one side that can choose to walk away with very few consequences. You can't both sides the conflict in this game in the same way that you can't both sides the conflict that inspired it. The game doesn't have anything coherent to say about revenge on a societal level, and it steamrolls out all the nuance of its message about revenge on a personal level. In the end, it all comes across like Ellie's guitar playing. It's one note. If you want to leave the video now, I'll understand. Credit where credit's due, I think The Last of Us 2 handles the empathy side of its story a lot better than it handles the revenge side. Its approach to the subject turned the game into a finely tuned discourse machine. Both games have a big trick that they pull on you at roughly the same point of the story. Both games pull off their big trick incredibly well.
In The Last of Us 1, The big trick was suddenly switching to playing as Ellie, reversing the roles and having you consider her experience in a way you were never asked to while you were playing as Joel. The Last of Us 2's big trick is incredibly similar, but way more ambitious. The big trick in The Last of Us 2 is that right when you think the game is over, you suddenly switch to playing as Abby.
Getting players to put themselves in Ellie's shoes was relatively easy. The whole game so far revolves around her. Abby was in the opposite situation. The whole game up to this point had been focused on building up a searing hatred for her. When I was playing through the game with my wife, we got to the Abby switch, and she literally yelled, "No, I don't want to do this." At first, the game is just as heavy-handed with this as it is about its revenge bad message. Oh wow, my dad is so nice and sweet and kind. Look at him save a pregnant zebra from a barbed wire fence. It's a little much, you know?
But when you get to actually be Abby, fight as her, live as her, that hate starts to break down. The stark difference between the young, optimistic Firefly child and the jaded, tough brick wall of a soldier she grows into immediately lets you know Abby has lost a lot of herself over time. She starts out where Ellie ends up, and as you play her story, you see her slowly return to who she could have been.
In almost every conceivable way, the 3 days spent with Abby are my favorite parts of the game. The gameplay is just more fun. Abby's writing and performance are so excellently done. It's incredible to watch her arc as her experiences with Yara and Lev and Owen slowly reawaken her idealism and her hope for a better future. Abby genuinely becomes a better person. She has to let go of the soldier she was, the person you hated, and she has to move on. I really saw Abby as her own complete person that I had misjudged. They pulled it off. It's just a shame that the trick only worked once.
See, while the game is clearly focused on making you feel bad for wanting to kill Abby, it also wants to make you feel bad for everyone else Ellie killed.
But if you want to make me feel bad for killing a character, you gotta give him more than one personality trait.
The first 5 things we learn about Manny are that he likes to have sex. Later, we find out that he likes to drink beer and watch anime.
People are really calling this game woke when the one Hispanic character is a sombrero away from being Speedy Gonzalez. Manny's arthritic dad gets more personality in his 4 lines of dialogue, and I like him 10 times more.
Everyone else in the Salt Lake crew gets a pretty similar level of characterization. Half of them get practically nothing. Jordan, whose name I had to look up 3 times while writing the script, he gets 2 lines of optional dialogue. There are 2 more people named Leah and Nick, and dying is the most important thing either of them do. Half the people in the Joel killing party are just so nothing that when Nora opens the body bag and says they got Danny, I pause the game and start racking my brain because I thought Danny was supposed to be a guy I knew already. Even the side characters that get more screen time are still pretty flat. Mel is pregnant woman number 2. Nora is a doctor who breaks the rules to help Abby sometimes. That's cool of her, I guess. Doesn't really make me feel any worse about beating her to death with a lead pipe. Owen is the one exception. He has more to his character than just being Abby's friend. In a lot of ways, he is the catalyst for Abby's transformation as a person. He is a version of Abby that never gave up that Firefly spirit. He kept hope for a better future. When Abby got lost in the darkness, Owen kept looking for the light.
That's what I think everyone else is missing. The writers were keenly aware that you would be biased against all the wolves in the same way you were biased against Abby. So they overcorrected. They smoothed out all the flaws so they could say, look how nice these people are. Look how much they love and support their dear friend Abby. Manny was so obviously supposed to be a likable character that I just didn't like him. Mel was so obviously the quiet, nice girl that she was more interesting as a concept than as a character. I can't say definitively, but I do have a suspicion that All this came from the last-minute rewrites they did based on the test player feedback.
The most real these characters ever felt to me was when they pushed back against each other. I love the scene where Mel yells at Abby, and Abby just sits there and takes it. It tells me more about both of them than I ever got from hearing about Manny's one-night stands.
Now, you could say that with so many characters, it would just take too long to get the player invested in all of them. But the thing is, the devs already designed the perfect solution to that. They already have an extremely effective way to make me care about the characters in very little time. It's the combat. Let me explain this in dog terms.
As Abby, you can play fetch with two dogs, Alice and Bear. Alice is clearly a very number one important kind of dog character. She hangs around the aquarium and brings you her toys. Alice shows Yara that dogs aren't all bad actually. They can be good boys and good girls. Bear shows up twice. Once at the beginning of Abby's campaign, and again about halfway through. You can play fetch with him exactly once and pet him exactly once. As Ellie, I killed both Alice and Bear. And despite all the time the game really wanted me to spend with Alice and how much they really wanted me to get attached to her, I felt, and still feel, 100 times worse about killing Bear. That's because I had no choice but to kill Alice. She attacked me in a cutscene and I pressed triangle. That was the extent of my interaction with her. Meanwhile, I made the choice to stab Bear. I felt bad about that. I can still hear that voice line of Bear's owner yelling out his name as I made Ellie plunge her knife into his throat. When I was playing fetch with Bear, both an hour later and 3 days before, I was thinking, did I have to kill him? Could I have snuck around? Should I have at least just shot him instead of hacking him to death with a penknife? The combat designers in The Last of Us made an incredibly robust system that almost makes you forget you are fighting against lines of code. Your enemies talk to each other. They plan out their movements. They get angrier and angrier at you the more of their friends you kill. Fighting enemies in The Last of Us is more than just clicking on heads. You have to treat your enemies as people or dogs. You have to engage with the decisions they make. Doing so implicitly recognizes their humanity, their capability to have thoughts and feelings just like you do.
And yet they take that away for the characters they want you to consider the most. You never fight against any of them. You never engage with them in the language of the game. The game is afraid to let you tell these big important story beats it has because it has to be prestige. It has to be serious. It has to be capital A art. On top of all these weird writing oversights, the game is weirdly selective about who gets to be a person. You fight 4 kinds of enemies in the game: wolves, scars, infected, and evil greasers, also called the Rattlers. Of these 4, you are only ever asked to think of the wolves as anything more than heads to shoot.
As Ellie, you hate the wolves. You spend hours gruesomely killing them. But when the game pulls the old Abby switcheroo, they try to make you like the wolves. You spend time in their community, see their gardens, play fetch with their dogs. It's made abundantly clear that they have a violent, militaristic culture, but a lot of that is pinned on the leader, Isaac. The game shows you that the WLF is full of a lot of different kinds of people. People who have banded together and made a genuine community. Maybe, it says, if they didn't have such violent leadership, they could be another Jackson. Compare that to the Seraphites. Ellie hates the Scars. Abby hates the Scars. Lev and Yara, both former Scars, hate the Scars. Across the entire 30-some hours of story, exactly 2 Seraphites are ever shown any sort of sympathy at all. When Abby and Yara go to the island to rescue Lev, there are several combat encounters where you, as Abby, kill dozens of Seraphites. Yara apparently has no problem with this. despite the fact that this was her community less than a week ago. And all the time I spent killing her people and looting their houses, she did not voice a single concern.
And remember, this is a Naughty Dog game. People don't keep their thoughts to themselves here.
It reminds me of the way I was taught World War II in my history classes in middle school. In World War II, us good old American boys fought Hitler. We fought Mussolini. And we fought the Japanese. The people that looked like us had evil leaders. The people that didn't, well, they just weren't human. They were base, violent creatures that had such a twisted ideology that we just had to kill all of them. Because otherwise, they wouldn't stop. They would never stop until every last one of us was dead. All this does have some unfortunate parallels to the Israel-Palestine conflict that inspired the whole game. Again, from Emanuel Mayberg, the wolves talk about the scars in very similar ways to how some Israelis talk about Palestinians. They're religious extremists who leave us no choice but to kill them. We have to kill them to have peace. And this game just isn't interested in questioning that. After the wolves and the Seraphites burn Seattle to the ground, Abby leaves and heads down to Santa Barbara to track down the last of the Fireflies. Ellie decides to go after her,
And the game decides that actually it's done with all this your enemies are people too stuff. It feels incredibly weird for a game to spend so much time and effort to make you think about your enemies and who they are as people, only to suddenly at the climax throw that all away and say, hey, here's some real sickos, kill them and feel no remorse.
the game doesn't even make an attempt to make you see the Rattlers as people. They are human traffickers who kidnap people for unclear reasons. Are they slaves? Do they keep them? Do they sell them? Does any Rattler have a problem with this? What about the big guy? Why is he like that? Why is there only one biker in the entire world? Why does Owen look so much like Abby's dad?
The Last of Us 2 claims to be a game about empathy. But almost every time it has the chance to be that, it fumbles. This isn't a game about empathy. This is a game about violence and empathy for one interesting person and the cardboard cutouts that surround her. Let me reiterate what I assume 80% of the comments you're going to read have already forgotten by now. I really like The Last of Us Part 2. It has me here chewing on its narrative and engaging with its themes in a way I rarely can with a game's story. I haven't thought this hard about a video game since Alan Wake. And if I'm being honest, I like that it's a messy game. As a sequel, it did everything it needed to do. It swung for the fences. It was ambitious. The first game is incredibly limited in scope and theme compared to this one. In this video, I only talked about how it failed at the two main things it wanted to do. But in spite of that, there is so much more that this game got right. This game has so much more to say, and I will be getting into that in the future. Wink wink, nudge nudge, The Last of Us 2 is a huge, risky game. And I admire that. In an industry where the biggest publishers rehash slight variations of the same thing over and over, sequels often mean the same game but with a bigger map and a little bit better graphics. The Last of Us Part 2 is a bigger game in every sense of the word. Bigger maps and levels, longer playtime, better graphics, way more ambition in writing and themes and scope. This game has problems, yes, big ones even. But it got me to think about it. It got me to engage with its themes. The Last of Us 2 has something to say. And I'll take that over a boring, reheated retread of a sequel any day.